Mentally ill children. My name's Bill McPhee, and I'm here with Kim LaMontagne, and we're just waiting for a few of the streaming to get online before we start. Um, just waiting for us to get online. Uh, let's see, let's see. Okay, it looks like our YouTube is coming online, and our Periscope, our Twitter is coming online, and our Facebook group, To Cry a Dry Tear, is coming online, and it also looks like we have our Facebook page, Helping Parents of Mentally Ill Children, coming online. So before I introduce Kim, I'm just going to let you know that my name is Bill McPhee, and this is our cast here. This is our broadcast called Helping Parents of Mentally Ill Children. And I come live to you every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And we have guests like we do have tonight with Kim. And just if you want to learn, I'm actually the author of this book here, To Cry a Dry Tear, Bill McPhee's Journey of Hope and Recovery with Schizophrenia. And I also was the publisher of SZ Magazine, which was a magazine on mental illness that I ran for 23 years. So looks like we're all on stream. So that's a little bit about me. And you can always find more about me and about these podcasts or these broadcasts on my website, billmcphee.ca. And McPhee is MacPhee. So billmcphee.ca. And you can also sign up for a newsletter that will give you our past interviews that I've done and our future interviews that we're going to be doing as well. So let me start and introduce Kim. Um, Kim LaMontagne has devoted her life to helping others survive and thrive in the face of mental illness. After surviving in silence with anxiety, major depression, suicidal thoughts, and alcohol use disorder, Kim has found recovery and a life of true happiness. On July 16, 2019, Kim celebrated 10 years of sobriety. Congratulations, Kim. A consistent top performer and winner of several director and peer choice awards within her organization. Kim suffered alone in the workplace because of shame and fear of stigma. Kim's professional performance, never wavering, but inside she was broken, empty, and on the verge of giving up. And Kim shares her story of recovery to help others find the courage, power, and strength to rise above the fear, stigma, and shame of mental illness. Kim, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the broadcast here. Thank you so much. I'm glad to have you. And we want to start off by introducing yourself. I know you're coming from Florida, and also we want to talk a little bit about your childhood. Where were you born, and how was your childhood? What did you do as a youngster?
Sure. So thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. Sure, a little bit about me. I was born in Woburn, Massachusetts on June 22nd, 1971. And we were a blue collar family. I have one brother, one sister, and two parents who were happily in love. It was a great marriage. My dad worked full time. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and we had a really great upbringing. I would say that, we got everything that we needed, and sometimes a little bit more. We were not a privileged family, but we definitely were very comfortable. Um, didn't have any significant trauma in my childhood that I can recall doing the excavation and the work that I've done
Mm-hmm.
since I've become sober. But I do know that at a very young age, I was drawn to substances. I may shock a few of you folks here,
Mm-hmm.
but in the second grade, in the second grade, I ended up skipping school with my entire neighborhood. There was over 20 of us, and the fact that none of us showed up at the bus stop on this one particular day kind of gave it away. But I skipped school and I was smoking cigarettes in the woods with my friends and doing really silly things. And I started experimenting with alcohol, I'd say in middle school, but more so in high school, and just it just kind of progressed from there. But my childhood, as I know it, was a very good it was a very good childhood.
Hmm.
But there was definitely looking back, there was some keys and some clues that I had a little bit of an issue, given the fact that, I engaged in some risky behavior in second grade.
Right, right. And did that continue throughout other grades and up into your, elementary and high school?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that I was a risk taker,
Hmm.
um, but yet at the same time, I needed my quiet time and I was introverted.
Hmm.
So I needed to be accepted, but at the same time, I needed to be alone.
Right.
Um,
You,
so sometimes I would engage in that behavior just to be accepted.
yeah. So I was going to say, you mentioned you wanted to be alone, but you also were you influenced by peer pressure? Your friends? Were you as a youngster? Were you a follower and more of a leader?
I would say that I was kind of a leader. I was a
Hmm.
trailblazer. I kind of went off on my own, and I always found something that gave me pleasure or gave me attention or recognition,
Hmm.
um, and validation, really. But they were all the wrong things, whether it be a substance, whether it be a male relationship, going to parties, staying out late,
Hmm.
lying to my parents, all those things that kids do. But at the same time, I was a very introverted child. At
Hmm.
the same time, I needed to have my quiet time.
Right.
I spent a lot of time in my room and did my own thing.
Hmm.
But
Uh,
on the outside, I was risky.
Yeah. Kim, what were the first signs or symptoms or signs of mental illness? And did you recognize them at first? Or talk a little bit about that.
I honestly did not recognize that I suffered with mental illness until about 2009 when I quit drinking. Um, when I walked into my doctor's office July 16th, 2009, and asked for help, I was met by the most non-judgmental nurse practitioner one could have ever found. And he held space for me that day and said, I'm going to help you and we're going to do this together. Um, and it really was after I got sober
Hmm.
that the depression really hit really, really hard,
Hmm.
because the band-aid of the alcohol use kind of was taken off, and I had to live life without that band-aid. But looking back,
Hmm.
now that I've kind of come on the other side, there was depression in high school,
Okay.
but I didn't know that that's what it was. There was depression in middle school,
Hmm.
um, but I didn't know what that was. I wrote a letter to a friend of mine when I was in middle school and said that I just didn't want to live anymore and I wanted to kill myself. Um, that got escalated to my teacher, which got escalated to my social worker, which brought my parents in.
Hmm.
And I didn't recognize that as depression. I just recognized that as I just didn't fit in and didn't want to go on.
Right.
Um, but now looking back at it, oh, absolutely. I was a teenager, I'd say, when it really
Hmm.
started, but I didn't recognize it until I was in my late 30s.
Right. And so before I ask you this next question, just want to go back and just make a comment where you talked about the practitioner who was the least judgmental and accepted you and everything. And I want to tell people is that we should never judge because the only shoes that we've ever walked in were our own. You know what I mean? We've only walked in our own shoes, and we don't know what the next person has ever gone through. That's I think I take personally. I take judgment out of everything. I don't. You can't judge a book by its cover. That's definitely for sure, right? Kim, you mentioned that you had a little depression. Did your anxiety come in at that time too, or is that a little bit later?
I think the anxiety came in absolutely after I quit drinking. Again, it was more depressive issues prior to that, but I didn't recognize it as depression because I masked it with the alcohol. But the anxiety once I quit drinking was really full force. It was fear of what's going to happen next, living in that fight or flight mode like
Mm-hmm.
99% of the time, always worrying about the what ifs, the just being that worried person all the time was so incredibly draining. And then having depression on the other side it was like the two were just, my mind was just going back and forth and being tormented
Right.
all the time.
Well, you know what I always say about anxiety is a lot of people try to put a finger on it and say, well, what is anxiety? What is anxiety? And I try to kind of make things simple. And to make things simple, what I think anxiety is basically a fear of the present and always worrying about the future. A fear of the
Absolutely.
present and always worrying about the future is what the definition in my thinking of what anxiety is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you about that.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you had a suicide attempt. Where long did that come in?
So that was in about 2015. I had quit drinking in 2009, but as I had mentioned, my depression had gotten a lot deeper and darker after I quit drinking. And I had been living alone for a while. My daughter was away at college. My boyfriend was taking care of an ill mother across the country, and I had been living alone and really loving the isolation, but not realizing how risky and how dangerous it was for me to be isolated because my depression just got worse and worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yet I still performed at a very high level in the workplace. I was still at the top of the sales team and meeting and exceeding my goals. No one knew I was feeling this way. Um, and the depression was this, it was challenging. It was very difficult. It was difficult for me to, to get through the days
Right.
and do what I needed to do on the work front. And then behind closed doors, I would really just kind of fall to
Yeah,
pieces.
yeah.
You know?
I think that's very common as far as through my experience of in the mental health field for so many years is that a lot of times people who have a an alcohol a problem is that they're very good workers. Like you said, you're meeting your sales deadlines. You're part of the sales teams. You're functioning at work fantastically, and that's probably because you knew you have to perform good if you're going to keep with the drinking in that too. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That's 100% true because if I were to fall behind, if I were to not do my work, then someone would say, what's going on? And so for me to perform, it was a way for me to hide that I had this secret.
Yeah.
You're right. I think often people who have this disease, who are living with this disease, whether it be substance use or mental illness, they are fully capable individuals and they are afraid to ask for help because they're afraid of being seen as incompetent. They're afraid of maybe losing a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid of someone judging them,
Mm-hmm.
misjudging them, and not seeing them as a person first, but more of a negative, putting a negative stereotype on them.
Right.
So many individuals in the workplace, they stay silent. And it's not the individuals who are low performers, medium performers, or the jobless individuals. It's
Yeah.
everyone who is susceptible to
Yeah.
this. And I think leaders, especially, are in a position where they're under high stress. They have high deadlines and expectations to meet. And I think a large majority of them, I don't know what the research states and what the
Mm-hmm.
percentage is, but I think a large majority of leaders are really petrified
Right.
of life
Wow.
and are living behind a mask. And it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to talk about
Yeah.
it, and we need to talk about it.
Right. Well, Kim, I want to kind of change the subject now, and I want to talk. We talked about what you went through. Let's talk about now. We were talking before the program began about. I was asking you if you do your own social media because I mentioned to you that I see you on Facebook a lot, and you have a lot of things that you do, and you're speaking now. You're helping people. Tell us what you're doing now, and talk a little bit about that.
Sure, sure. So I actually have a lot going on in my life right now. I
Mhm.
have a full-time job where I'm a director of partnerships at a company called Cognito. They're based in New York City, and they are a healthcare simulations company that uses the power of conversation with virtual humans to help bring awareness and teach individuals how to have conversations about mental health and substance use. That's what I do full time during the day.
Mhm.
But additionally, I am a speaker. I speak at conferences around the United States, and I've also spoken up in Canada as well.
Mhm.
I do on-site corporate trainings with businesses around the country who are committed to creating and sustaining a mentally healthy workplace. So I do on-site corporate training. I'm also a volunteer and a speaker through the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Great.
And through that, I actually share my own story of living with mental illness by presenting in their what they call In Our Own Voice program,
Mhm.
where a person who lives with mental illness brings their story to a workplace or a group of individuals to bring the lived experience out in the forefront.
Right.
Um, and I just recently was a visionary author for a book, and this is the book here. It's titled "It's Okay to Not Be Okay,"
Mhm.
and it is contains stories from individuals around the United States, Canada, and the UK,
Mm.
men and women who are brave enough to come forward, write a chapter sharing their own personal story
Wow.
of living with mental illness
Wow.
or substance use, how they got through it, and how they're giving back today as a result of it. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty proud of that
That
book.
sounds great. Now, can you give artists, do you have a website or do you have how can people find that book and how can they contact you as well if they're looking for a speaker or something like that?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm on social media. I have a Facebook page, Kim LaMontagne, and I think it's titled Kim LaMontagne, Passionate Mental Health Advocate. You can certainly follow me on that page. I'm on LinkedIn as well, where my messaging on the LinkedIn platform is really speaking to those corporate leaders who I'm sharing my story
Hmm.
on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm being extremely vulnerable and putting out there that I'm living very successfully now with mental illness. But all of you folks on social media here on LinkedIn who knew me 5 years ago, you had no clue what I was dealing with.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of work on LinkedIn, really trying to reach those leaders. I have a website which is kimlamontagne.net, and LaMontagne is LaMontagne. So it's kimlamontagne.net. And then I also have an email, which is kim@kimlamontagne.net. But I'm very active on Facebook and LinkedIn. Haven't gotten on Twitter yet. I haven't met one yet.
Yeah.
So I think I'm into that
I
soon.
actually like Twitter. I'm a big fan of Twitter. I do like it, I must admit. Um, Kim, this is called Helping Parents of Mentally Ill Children. Tell us for the parents out there, somebody dealing with an adolescent or somebody in their teens or in their 20s who are at home. Talk a little bit about parents. What would you like to share with parents and tell parents of children with mental illness?
Well, first of all, what I want to say is that you're not alone and that it's okay to talk about it and to not have shame around the fact that your child is living with mental illness. It is a disease that your child is living with and trying to navigate. And I understand the behaviors sometimes are very challenging, and you think, what on earth is going on? But to try and separate your child as a person from the behaviors that they're displaying and know that those behaviors are symptoms of the disease that they're living with. Um, that's very important, but most importantly, to know that you are not alone. I just read an article yesterday on social media about parents of children with mental illness and the dirty secret that we carry because we're so ashamed that maybe our kids aren't on the soccer field or playing baseball, but instead they are at a special school for to deal with the disease that they're living with. And many times parents who have children with mental illness isolate themselves.
Hmm. Hmm.
And don't seek resources and don't talk about it.
Right.
And if I can leave you with one thing today, it would be to talk about it, because there are more. What I've learned from sharing my story, whether it's in the corporate setting, I've learned that there's a ton of people on LinkedIn who are reacting to my posts and who are saying, "Holy cow, it takes guts to do what you do. Me too. I suffer too." So I know that there's a ton of leaders in the workplace who are
Right.
suffering, but I also know that although you feel alone,
Hmm.
that there are a lot of parents out there who are feeling the same way, and know that there's resources through National Alliance on Mental Illness or a local, whatever, maybe a church, if you wanted to reach out to a church. Just know that it's okay to ask for help,
Hmm.
and it's okay to advocate for your child. It is okay as well to say that you're not the right provider for me. I need to find someone else. Because I have had a doctor who passed a lot of judgment on me when I admitted that I had suffered with alcohol use, actually got very mad at me.
Hmm.
And I ended up firing him because he just didn't treat me with respect. So know that you have options and that you can drive the care that your child receives. I know it's frustrating. I know that there's a lot of phone calls, emails, and follow up and waits, but you have the power to push and to advocate for your child, and only not settle for anything less than he or she deserves.
Right. Okay. Well, Kim, before we wrap up here, is there anything else you'd like to say, or any final thoughts before I close this out?
I wouldn't say final thoughts, but just again, my biggest takeaway for tonight, that is for anyone who's feeling alone and isolated, you are not alone. And please, there is no shame in asking for help. No shame whatsoever. We are all suffering on different levels.
Right.
And to reach out and ask for those resources to support either yourself or your loved one, because you matter.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Kim, for being here, and thank you, folks, for tuning in. And if you can, maybe you can share this video. You can go to my page, billmcphee.ca, and McPhee is MacPhee. You can sign up for the newsletter, which will tell you about future guests and links to past guests. And just to let you know, next week on February the 16th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm going to be interviewing Betsy Ross. And Betsy has written two books called Flight 1 and Flight 2. So tune in for that. And we'll see everybody next week, hopefully. And Kim, thank you very much for being here with me today.
Great. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Kim. Bye bye for now.